We are Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to continue our preview series of SEC basketball teams for the 2022-23 season. Blake, interesting times in Starkville as we preview Mississippi State today. The Bulldogs under Ben Howland just never really worked out. I don't think they won an NCAA tournament game. They made a change to Chris Jans, who did win an NCAA tournament game last year, and I think is a really good fit in Starkville for, among other reasons, he recruited the JUCO ranks very well at New Mexico State, and that has been a route to success in Starkville for a long time now.
Yeah, I think it'll have to be a route to success. If they're going to be successful, I just think that's the way they're going to have to win. And I mean, he understands that. He's one of those, I think, kind of forward thinkers in terms of adapting to the era that we're in, and he's done as well, as many others as that when it comes to just being able to build a roster in the transfer era. And like you said, he had a lot of success at New Mexico State with that, and obviously a lot of ties to the JUCO ranks. Just from his background, his history there. So yeah, I mean, I think he was the right fit. We talk about kind of the SEC coaching hires this offseason and finding the fit. Like I feel like in terms of fit for Mississippi State, this was probably one of the better ones just in terms of finding a guy for your school and what you can achieve. I think in your program. And yeah, to me, it feels like he again is kind of like one of those forward thinkers when it comes to transfers and JUCOs and all of that, and understands that this is kind of the way of the future. And so yeah, we'll see. I don't know how much that will translate this season, but he has certainly brought in a lot of new guys to pair with a couple of pretty talented, I think, returning guys. Just depends on how everything mixes together, and obviously you have a very big kind of program mover to replace in Iverson Molinar, and I think that'll obviously be a challenge too. So.
Well, you look at the roster, Blake. Certainly the kids on it played a lot of basketball a year ago. You have four guys who averaged 32 minutes or more, all between 32 and 34, albeit all four at different schools. Then you have a bunch of returning players, four who played at MSU last year, one, Will McNair Jr., who played for Jans at New Mexico State. Tolu Smith, DJ Jeffries, Shakeel Moore, Will McNair all averaged between about 23 and 28 minutes a game. And then Cam Matthews, who averaged just over 18, another returnee. Then you add in four recruits, two of whom snuck in the top 150. It will be interesting to see how these guys gel, and if some of these guys who were lower tier players like Jamel Horton, who I think was the America East Defensive Player of the Year, Dashawn Davis, who put up some nice numbers for an awful Oregon State team, Eric Reed Jr., who did the same thing at a really bad SEMO team. And then you got a bit of a stat sheet stuffer in Tyler Stevenson, 6'8", 215, who played a lot of minutes just down the road south of there at Southern Miss. Certainly a lot of guys who've played a lot of college basketball.
Yeah, and I think it's just what we say, the transferring up. That's always the question, because a lot of these guys came from teams that did not have a lot of success last season, right? If you look at the records, I'm trying to pull all of these up. Southern Miss last year goes 7-26. Albany goes 13-18. Southeast Missouri State goes 14-18. And then Oregon State goes what they go last year? It wasn't good. 3-28,
It
right?
was awful. Yeah.
So that is like, I mean, clearly, I think for those guys, like maybe don't necessarily love having that kind of season, and now you're kind of looking elsewhere to be able to have more success. And so I think that's always an interesting aspect too. Is I'm not insinuating these guys were the reason for that, but when you're kind of stuck and feel like, man, we're coming off a bad season. Can I find a better fit for myself in terms of maybe being able to turn things around, have a successful season? I feel like, for someone like Davis and these other guys, like you mentioned, now you get kind of a fresh start, and it does give you that opportunity, knowing that you have played a lot of minutes, even for teams that maybe have not had a lot of success, specifically last season, because again, Oregon State, what was it the year before, did just fine and all that. But so I think those are the kind of things you look at with guys who are transferring up, and the numbers are there in terms of minutes and production. I think it's just it is a big leap, perhaps going from different places to the SEC, and we always say that with all the transfer guys. If it's not power conference to power conference, which again, even that's not a guarantee, right? But that I think sometimes gives you a better gauge of kind of experience in this type of league. And we don't have a lot of that just yet with some of these guys that are coming in. Not to say that don't have a lot of potential, because I think all of these guys do. I mean, I think specifically someone like Davis, he is coming from a power conference. He's a former, JUCO All-American kid. I mean, you look at kind of the numbers last year, he did a lot, and I think he'll be counted on to do a lot of that this season and kind of be the person that puts up big numbers. I think for this group, and I think he'll have to for them to have a lot of success. So yeah, I think this group he's had it in terms of just transfers. These are all guys that can put up numbers, or they have at their previous stops. I'm just curious to see kind of how it all blends together at Mississippi State.
Yeah, I guess the point guard would be Davis, who got 5.5 assists and 2.5 turnovers a game. So he's 2.3 assists to turnovers, which is very good. Shot 46% from the field, not much of a 3-point shooter, not a very good free throw shooter for a guard at 66%. By the way, that's going to be a theme. Free throw shooting, this is not like a good team
Well,
from
this
the
ain't a
line or
this
behind
does
the
look like
arc.
a, yes, let's say period, just a shooting team. I think
Yeah.
this will, I mean, if we're just looking at previous numbers, that's one thing that does stand out with me is I don't see a team that's going to shoot a very high percentage in terms of shooting the ball.
Yeah.
And that could be a big issue.
Yeah. They had some, I don't know if volume scores is fair, but that it might be. So I would think that Davis and Shakeel Moore will split a lot of the ball handling duties. Moore was a nice player for State a year ago. 1.4 assists to turnovers, did shoot free throws well, the best free throw shooter on the team, other than Reed, who comes in from SEMO. I would presume that Reed plays off the ball, even though he's 6'2", and the same thing for Jamel Horton, who's 6'4". Both those guys averaged double-figure scoring a year ago. SEMO's been awful for a while now, and America East is just not a very good league. Both those are probably bottom third, bottom fourth leagues in the country where they came from. You've got, other than that, let's see, they brought in a couple of kids. I assume Martavius Russell, who scored a lot of points in high school, and Sean Jones Jr., who was not a very highly rated recruit, guys that could play a little bit on the wing. But the backcourt, they've got some guys who played and who've scored a lot. Whether they can score efficiently, I think, is one of the questions we've got here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, I think you'll have Davis and Moore would be my guess. They'll kind of form that backcourt combo from the start. Just based on again what I mean, Moore's coming back, and he's at least been there, right? We talk about needing that playing time in the SEC. I mean, he's had that, and obviously, I think with Davis, we just talked about him, and I feel like having just played a lot of minutes, even if it was on a bad team last year specifically, he will have to play. I think that's sort of your backcourt combo that will be kind of what you expect to push things forward from the start. Whatever, however, everything else kind of plays out, I think that remains to be seen with the other guys, whether it's Reed or Horton. Um, I think those are probably your next two in line in terms of what that looks like. Because I know Horton, like you mentioned earlier, he's reigning America East Defensive Player of the Year. Could form a nice combo if he's in there with Davis. And we talked about Reed, obviously someone that like you said, I don't know if volume score. I think it's probably by necessity scoring. Like it's just these guys had to score. Like it was one of those things. But he still was ranked in the top 10 in the OVC in a lot of those kind of key offensive categories and shot the ball. I think okay. What was his numbers? I think he didn't shoot bad from three. I don't know how many he made.
36%. He was 82% from the line, which will be the best on this team. 42% from the field. So not a great shooter. And again, Semo's just been a bad team for a while. Yeah, I mean that's and he did average as many assists as turnovers, which isn't bad for a guy that's a scoring type guard. So there's that too.
Yeah, made 71 threes, made 61 the year before. So I think that's, he shot 46% from three the year before. So I think he's probably someone that, I would keep an eye on and kind of circle as a potential, maybe X factor in terms of giving them a boost perhaps from outside. So I think that's what I would look at with Reed. And again, the other guys, I think it's just, but we are again talking about two guys who are coming from Albany and SEMO, and I think just how they kind of fit into what you need in the SEC, because we've talked about the combos in the backcourt in the SEC, right? Whether it's Vescovy and Ziegler, whether it's Wheeler and any of those guys on Kentucky, Alabama, Auburn. Probably Auburn's got probably the most experienced group in the backcourt.
Yeah.
And so, that's again what we're comparing it to. And I think you have to always keep that in mind. It's not just what you look at with this team, it's how do they fare knowing what else they're gonna face, like what else is out there. And I think that's important to remember too. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential with this backcourt group. I just think that I think depth overall is a question mark right now because I don't know who plays how much. And again, this is one of those things where, like, if you get one of these guys who maybe just turns out to not really be what you think he could be in the SEC,
Yeah.
that even one of these guys and on this, I think, roster, I think that can be significant in terms of changing your expectations for what Mississippi State can accomplish.
Yeah, no, if it doesn't go that way, then I look at a team that's got, nine guys that played a lot of minutes a year ago, plus
Yeah.
whatever they get from the four freshmen. And I think Russell was a red shirt, if I'm correct on that. But in any case, yeah, I think the situation's better in the front court. Tolu Smith, I have been banging that drum for a couple of years. I feel like he's one of the more underappreciated players in the league. He's going to get his due now. Averaged 14.2 and 6.5 a year ago. Shot 58% from the field. Does not shoot the three. 65 from the line, which isn't awful for a big man. They've got DJ Jeffries, whatever he is. I'm still not entirely sure. They got Will McNair Jr., who, of course, knows how Jans wants to play. He's kind of one of those gritty glue guys where did a little bit of everything a year ago, blocked a few shots, not a lot, rebounds a bit, not a big scorer, but he's efficient when he shoots it, 55% from the field, not a good foul shooter. More assists than turnovers, which again for big is often hard to do. So, and then Cam Matthews, another kid who was kind of a glue guy for them a year ago, that played well in a supporting role. Nothing to look at in the numbers that suggests he's a bad player, but he's just kind of one of those, second, third guys off the bench type of guys. They do have some guys here, Blake, who have produced before, and so I think probably when I'm looking at the front court, that to me seems to maybe be I don't know, maybe a bigger strength. Certainly, maybe a little bit of a question, a little bit less of a question, given what these guys have done in the past, is maybe the better way to put it.
Yeah, I think with Smith, I mean that's a nice starting point because, like you said, we've always kind of looked at him as one of the more underrated players probably in the SEC because he did have Iverson Molinar around him, and I I think that's my thing is, and I know this goes back to
Losing
kind of the bigger.
Molinar.
Well, and it's like, who is that? Who's the Molinar on this team? Because I don't really see one right now, and I think that can be an issue, right? When you get in the SEC and you have some of these games where you're down four with a minute to go and you've got to go down and get like who does the ball go? Let me ask you that, like, who
Yeah.
does the ball go to right now in that scenario, right? I think that's your question because the thing with Jans is if you look at their tempo at New Mexico State, we talked about this before. Like they were not running up and down the floor. Like they were pretty much a team that
Yeah.
kind of tried to get you where they wanted to get you in terms of taking their time, getting the shot. Now, I think everything has to flow through Smith, but like, can he be that next evolution of an Iverson Molinar as the big man? I don't. That's what I wonder about with this team. And but again, he is going to be the guy they have to lean on from the start because he's got the numbers to back up, what he's capable of. 14 points a game, 6 rebounds. He shot what, 58%. He said, I mean, he can be that guy. But I think that right now, you know, I look at how the roster's built, and Jeffries, he'll start. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He'll be in there and be able to, I think, give them quality minutes, but it's again the production. Can he expand his production beyond what it has been? Because I think that's going to have to be the case. Like, I think Jeffries is probably just as important as Smith in this scenario because, I mean, for a small forward guy, you need a little bit of everything from a guy like that. And I think, given what we said with kind of the rest of the roster that is proven in other places, but not necessarily proven at Mississippi State yet, I think Jeffries has to, go now be that double digit scorer. Like, he has to be a guy who can score double digits for them to win. I think that's the only way they win. And then the other guys, Stevenson, we talked about coming from Southern Miss, adds experience, as a grad transfer. I think he'll help him rebounding wise. McNair's got good size, of course. There's familiarity there with Jans because he started as many games as he did last year with them. I think he'll help him on the defensive end of the floor too. But I mean, really, I still think it's one where, we're talking about a team that I'll just be honest, like I've probably talked my way around it, but like I don't know what to make of this team. Like, I don't have a great read on what they're going to become because, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just, we always say, like, by necessity when there's a coaching change. How many times we had to say this in our videos so far because we've had so many coaching changes in the SEC. You just kind of have to put together a roster and hope that the pieces fit together. And I think with this one, you build around Tolu Smith. You need Jeffries to kind of expand beyond what he's already been. And then I think you certainly need a Davis, a Moore, to continue to push their numbers up. Um, and I just, yeah, I'm probably more curious than anything. I don't think I'm pessimistic. I think I'm just curious how it's all gonna come together with this roster.
Well, I'll give you some good background. I think the most similar situation in some ways to State is Vanderbilt. Now, there's some big differences. State had a coaching change, um, being one of them. The other being that State's got a lot more impact transfers coming in too. But Vanderbilt lost Scottie Pippen Jr. State loses Iverson Molinar. Big losses. Maybe two of the top 5 players in the league. And you sit down and you look at the roster and you go, hey, they've got some guys who've played, some guys who've done some good things. Maybe once you start digging into the roster, it's a little bit better than you might have thought if you just kind of glanced at it. Then you start looking around the rest of the league, and that's where you have the problem because everybody has reloaded with transfers. Recruiting, I don't know that it's ever been better. You've got 4 or 5, maybe Final Four contenders at the top in this league. And then again, top to bottom, it's just so good. Like, there's not a give me win in this league, I don't think. I mean, you might argue South Carolina, but South Carolina just signed a top 5 player in the country classified early. Now, I don't know that there's much to build around, but the point is, and you see this in KenPom too. You go to KenPom, and what there are, every team in the league is top 100 preseason KenPom. I don't know that that's ever happened before in the SEC. And number 2, I think that 12 of the 14, according to where he's got them, are like NIT caliber or better. Now, that would include State too, but it's all these teams are jockeying for wins, and there's only so many to go around.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's always important that when we do these team previews, remember, you have to compare these team previews to the other teams. Like, the individual, like, you have to compare the teams because otherwise, we can look at a team and say, "Oh yeah, like this is a great roster and all that," but is the upside compared to the other teams the same, right? And I think that's where
Yeah.
you probably look at a team like this. I said earlier, I think Jans is the right guy, like, for Mississippi State. I think it absolutely is. Um, but I think, we're talking about a coach that has just taken over a program. This is year 1, and you don't expect him to have everything in place, even if he is a guy who has leaned into being able to kind of build his roster from scratch each season if he has to, because we've seen him do it before, just at a different location. So I, I think that's it. If we're talking about like, I think the potential is there for this team to kind of put themselves into that mix of, perhaps being a bit higher than people would say, maybe beyond that bottom four. Because again, that's what we keep talking about, because there are other new coaches too. And, Mike White, technically not a new coach, but he is in a new spot for a team that won one SEC game last year. So,
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of initial, like, you can quickly get yourself near that top half of the SEC as a new coach in this league. And I think Jans has put together a roster that at its best can allow them to do that. I just think I probably would have more questions just because I don't know. There are some things maybe with some of these other teams. And like right now, would I pick Mississippi State ahead of South Carolina? Yes. Would I pick them ahead of Vanderbilt? Yes. I think those are the things like you start to look at, and again, that's where you play the comparison game, because the potential I feel like is there, but I do want to see how it comes together and
Yeah.
what they look like from a backcourt standpoint. I think that's my biggest thing right now is they got a lot of guys who can be really good. I think Davis, Moore, Reed can shoot it. I think that'll be something that, like we said, I think this team's got to have good shooting to be successful. And I don't see a ton of that necessarily on paper. But I think those are the kind of, intangibles that you need to see from this team, probably to get a much better feel of where they're going to, rank as compared to what we think realistically could be 5 or 6 potential top 25 teams in the preseason. Is this a team that will be able to win those kind of games against those kind of teams and have enough, kind of, I don't know, like just have enough upside to be able to do that? I'm not real sure yet. So
Well, and I think Vandy here again is a good analogy. I do think State is better, but the thing we said about Vanderbilt is, look, is this a lower tier team in the league? Probably so. That's probably the most likely outcome. Is Vanderbilt's probably going to be playing that Wednesday night game, but like with the way the roster is constructed, with the way the coach wants to play, with some of the new guys they brought in, would it be the craziest thing we've ever seen if that team, snuck into the NCAAs as at large, as a 10 or 11, won some close games, maybe had a better resume than a Ken Palm. In other words, a lot of the close games went their way. And that's what the tournament committee picks on is who did you beat? Where did you beat them? Those kind of things. Is there a scenario there for State to make the NCAA tournament? Yeah, I think so. Is it more likely that State is probably playing in a Wednesday night game, given where the program is, given the competition around State? I would probably say yes, however.
yeah, I mean, I think you're probably talking about a solid NIT type team. I feel
Yeah.
like that's
Yeah.
probably the best right now. Look, we know we obviously don't know how the season's going to play out, but if we're making projections right now, I think that's probably the most likely scenario. Um, but like we said, could Florida be worse than we think? Could LSU be like? But that's what we're talking about, the separators, right? Florida's got a Colin Castleton. LSU's got a KJ Williams that I know is coming from Murray State. Mississippi State's got a Tolu Smith. But it's the pieces around them. And I think those are with all these teams that have new coaches, because I think it's pretty clear at this point. If you had to ask me what my top five is, I think the top 5 spots are set. That's Kentucky,
Mhm.
Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Auburn, in whatever order you want to put them in. Beyond that, I think you got a lot of questions in terms of who do you put where. Again, you're talking about comparing Mississippi State to a Florida, and LSU, and Ole Miss, and A&M, a Missouri. Those kind of teams, to me, that's the teams you're comparing Mississippi State to. And I think when you look at their schedule, non-conference is pretty manageable. I mean, realistically, when you look at it, I don't think there's a lot. They got a road game at Minnesota. They're going to play Marquette. I don't know if that's part of a tournament. I'd have to look up their full schedule here, but so that's manageable. But just like everybody else, the SEC slate is going to be tough, right? And so, yeah, I'm not down on this Mississippi State team because, like I said, I think Jans was the right guy, but I just think the expectations should probably be realistic in terms of I don't think this is going to be just 1 year in and all of a sudden everything they
Yeah.
want to do with this program and they do it in one season. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think Jans has the ability to rebuild the roster year in and year out the way he needs to make Mississippi State a consistent top half team in the SEC again. And I think that's probably the
Yeah.
thing if you're a Mississippi State fan. I think you lean on more than just what happens this season.
Any parting thoughts on State?
Um, no, because like I said, I think it's the key to this season is very simple. like it is it's Davis, it's Reed, it's Horton, it's Stevenson, it's McNair, it's all the new guys that are coming in, and knowing that they're probably not going to put up the same numbers they put up at their previous schools, right? But I think it's just seeing what does that look like then, like how dramatic of a difference is there in their production, and if it's not that dramatic, then this is a team that can absolutely,
Yeah.
I think, shoot for an NCAA tournament bid, perhaps as a bubble team. Um, but if it's not, then it's starting to look at, well, has Shakeel Moore expanded his game as a shooter? Has, DJ Jeffries bumped up to a 12 point per game type score versus a 9 point per game type score? Those kind of things like that. And as we always say, Chris, I think everything is Tolu Smith in terms of, you know, I mean, we could say this about anybody, right? But you talk about an injury to Tolu Smith or something like that. I think this
Yeah.
roster has so much less room for error with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm just I don't know. I don't think. I mean, I say there's not a ton of depth. I think there's. I think I'm gonna say the same thing I've said about others. There's options here, but
Yeah.
in terms of what their overall depth will be by the time we get to SEC play or as we go throughout SEC play, man, I'm just not sure yet. I wanna kind of see how some of these pieces mesh together, and um, then maybe to me, Mississippi State's a perfect. We'll revisit you in December type thing, where
Yeah.
let me see what you look like that first month of the season, and then I will have a much better read on what you can be. So.
Before I give you my parting thoughts on the Bulldogs, a word from our sponsor, Stakes. Big games coming up in SEC football this week. We want to hear if you guys agree or disagree with our picks in the Stakes app. That is STAKES. Go to playwithstakes.com/14. Sign up for Stakes. Place your predictions on our questions, whether you like our takes or don't. Use the invite code Southeastern14. When you sign up, you'll get a double welcome bonus. The app is free to play, free to join. It is not a betting app. It's just to have fun and make picks. You can win stuff. It's not the light. Help us out. Go to Stakes. Have a great time in that app. You will enjoy it, and you'll thank us for it later. Okay. I thought you said something earlier that I meant to respond to, and that's who's your go-to guy? Like when you need a bucket, who's your guy? My answer is Tolu Smith. And the one thing is they got a couple of guards who can get him the ball, that have done it efficiently before. So, getting the ball to a post guy for a touch sometimes is tricky, but Davis had a pretty good assist to turnover rate at Oregon State. But I think you also said something that's interesting, and it's what if you get an injury? We just don't know what some of these guys are going to be. Horton, Davis, Reed, Stevenson, what are those guys on a bigger stage? We don't know. If they are something like what they were at previous stops, this might be an NCAA tournament team. But that's a question for me too that I thought you pointed out. And if you get an injury, I mean, I'm just not sure the freshmen they're bringing in, including the one they redshirted, where do those guys place? No idea. One of those guys jumps up and is a wild card, then maybe that obviously that would help too. But that's another thing is I don't know what that bunch of newcomers is going to be.
I mean, look, you remember last year, right? I mean, how many games did Smith miss due to injury?
There
Um,
was that.
I mean, it's quite a few, And I'm not I'm not like this isn't an injury prone question. This is a 22-23 roster question in terms of like room for error. And I think my
Yeah.
other question with that will be he's accustomed to playing a lot of minutes and he's going to do that here. He'll play, quite frankly, I think he'll play 30 plus minutes a game pretty easily. Um, you know, his offensive numbers, he was pretty efficient, right?
Yeah.
Outside of, maybe missing a few free throws here and there. But, that's the thing too is, now you remove a Molinar from the equation. I don't necessarily think right now there's anyone on the perimeter that is the same, is Iverson Molinar. So how do teams guard him differently now? Because I think he is clearly the guy. Whereas before, I felt like, certainly people knew that they had to prepare for this guy. But I'm just curious to see, what kind of defenses does he see now, knowing that this is not going to be a great shooting team, at least on paper.
Yeah.
And can't, are one of those guards going to break out? And I'm not saying be Iverson Molinar, but who's the breakout guard? Is that Davis? Is it Moore? Is it any of these other guys, Reed or Horton? Like, that's the question for me because you have to have those guys. Because
Yeah.
if you don't, then guess where all the defense is going? That
Yeah.
defense is they're all on Tolu Smith. And that again, I think is another part of the equation here.
Okay, here's another thing just to kind of sum it up. We talked about they've got 9 guys that played 18 or more minutes last year at a Division I level, average that. They've only got 2 guys that shot over 70%. I'm sorry, 3 guys that shot over 70% from the line. So 6 of those guys shot under 70%, including 3 of those transfer guards, which is not a well, Stevenson's not a guard, but that's not good. Now Moore shoots 77%. Reed shot 82 if the ball's in their hands. Maybe in better shape in the final minutes of a game, but sometimes you don't always get to pick that. 3-point shooting, they've got 2 guys that shot over 35%. They both shot 36% each. That's Horton and Reed. I'd presume that goes down a little bit because you're going to be facing tougher defenses. 3-point numbers across the board just weren't that good for them. That sort of underlines the question that I hope we haven't beaten to death. But if you want to quantify what we're thinking, there it is.
Well, and it's a team that shot 29.5% from 3 last season, 342nd nationally. So even if you factor in the guys you have coming back and you add those numbers in, like you said, for the other guys, that number's probably going up, but I don't think it may not be going up as much as you want it to heading into the season. I think that's another reason why when teams defend Mississippi State, I just feel like, unless it's just kind of a surprise breakout in several spots where these guys actually are knocking down threes consistently, I just wonder. I think Mississippi State will play a lot of games that are lower scoring than
Yeah.
their competitors. And I think that can be a good thing, though, right? Because if maybe they have to play that grinded out type style where, and like we said, with Jans, I mean, if you just look at his teams and the way he had them at Mexico State, like they weren't playing the fastest tempo by any means. So just maybe just have to. I think they'll just have to grind out some of these games and grind out some wins, and yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's crazy how alike we think. You got to my next point. I think the path to victory to state is a lot of those 64-61 type games with low possessions and hope you make your own breaks in the final minutes. Anyway, thank you for watching. We either have previewed or will preview every single SEC basketball team for the coming season. Of course, we're doing football constantly. Best way to catch all our content is hit that subscribe button. We will have some more SEC hoop stuff. We'll rate our top players. We'll give our preseason power rankings. So be sure to watch for those. Again, best way to catch that, hit that subscribe button. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for watching us at Southeastern 14.